Hey guys, this is George with Firehouse Music, and today I want to talk about music theory in general as a thing. Well, something specific about music theory that I want to talk about, and that is it's important to know what things sound like. So, what is music theory? I did a video about this before, but it bears mention. Music theory is just a system of naming. We're naming sounds, right? So when we're talking about intervals and we have, minor second, major second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth, and so on. Perfect fourth, breaker fifth, the tritone, which can be an augmented fourth, augmented fifth, the minor sixth, the major sixth, minor seven, sorry, major seven, and the octave. Right there, we're just naming sounds. So when we talk about chord types and we talk about different triad types, once again, we're naming sounds. We're talking about chord progressions, we're naming sounds. We're talking about modes, we're naming sounds. You guys get the point. It's just a system for cataloging and naming the sounds that we utilize in music. Now, here's the problem that I see with the way music theory is taught sometimes. And I don't know where this comes from. I never understood it. But some people try to almost gatekeep music theory, or not so much gatekeep. It's like they're trying to make it so complicated, so difficult to understand. Like you need a course in quantum physics in order to understand how these sounds go together, and that's not the case at all. And I can make that point with really any musical concept, and you guys can ask me if you guys want to hear something specific. I can explain it in very simple terms. You don't have to write a doctorate dissertation in order to explain a simple concept. Like for instance, I recently heard somebody explain the relationship between altered dominant chord, so specifically the 7-flat-9 chord, and the diminished chord. And they went into a whole dissertation. I mean, most of it was correct. And they're talking about this and they're talking about that, when ultimately I have a 7-flat-9 chord. This sound is called 7-flat-9. Okay, that's what matters. That sound. That's a 7-flat-9. Now, here's a 7-flat-9. Here's a diminished chord. Okay? So 7-flat-9, I could take the fifth of, in this case I'm playing D. Fret 5, that's D. There's my shell voicing. Okay, so I have D, F sharp, and C. And then I have the E flat here, which is the flat 9. Okay? And then I can just take that, put the fifths on the bass, and do this. And I once again have a diminished chord. So if I play a rootless diminished 7, I'm sorry, not diminished 7. 7-flat-9. All I did was I took the D out. I removed the D from the chord. And I end up with a diminished chord. Which diminished chord? Well, it could be any of the notes in the chord, because a diminished chords have no inversion, so that means that F sharp diminished, A diminished, C diminished, E flat diminished are all the same chord. So another way of saying that is that this chord is simultaneously an F sharp diminished, C diminished, an E flat diminished, or an A diminished. That's it. That's the concept. So this chord and this chord are interchangeable because this chord is contained within this chord. And that's a very simple concept. There's no need to make it complicated. And I could go on. I could talk for hours about this because there's so many things that people overcomplicate for no reason. No reason. Tritone substitution. They turn into this esoteric thing, real complicated. All it is, I promise I'll stop after this. I don't want to ramble forever. All it is I'm replacing the bass note, right? So if I'm playing, say, in jazz we play a 2-5-1, right? So I'm playing B minor 7. Oh, lost my sound. B minor 7. What is this? E9 and A major 7. Right? Real simple, 2-5-1. And I want, for some reason, I'm like, okay, well, I don't like all that jumping of my bass. I want to play for my bass line. Okay, so, and I play the exact same chords. So now I have B minor 7. Now I have a B flat 7 sharp 5. But look, what's the difference? I just took this note, the bass note, and I put it over here because that's the note that I need. And now I get my chromatic bass line that I wanted, and I made it work. Or maybe I start with a chromatic sound, and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I want my bass to go jumpy up and down. So then I go the other way, and I make a tritone substitution in the opposite direction. Usually is the way I explain. It goes the other way. So why are we making this so complicated, guys? We don't have to. It's music theory is simple. It's just about naming the sounds, right? If we're talking about the chords, the chord names, all you have to do is learn what they sound like. The other thing I have a problem with is people just throwing musical words around and not knowing what they sound like. This guy is not a musician at all. Richard Feynman, he was a physicist, and he has a quote that I really like, and he said there's a big difference between knowing something, actually knowing something, and just knowing the name of something. And I feel that a lot of musicians are guilty of this. They've read stuff, they've memorized concepts, but they have no idea what they're talking about in terms of what they sound like. So, and I'm saying this because I used to be one of those guys. When I first started, playing music back in the Stone Age, just kidding, it was the 90s, okay? But it might as well be the Stone Age. I studied very hard because I really wanted to understand music, and I read a lot of books. So I could talk about music theory extensively, and I could cite all the different rules and concepts and this and that. But I couldn't play a lick. I couldn't play any of the things that I was telling you about. And then I had to spend probably a decade, maybe a little bit longer than that, figuring out how those concepts work on the instrument. And then I've spent the past 20 years distilling those concepts in a way that people understand. So you don't have to have them sit down for 6 years just to learn that you can take a chord and just, that you can play a chromatic line down on the bass because you make it so convoluted. You don't have to make things that complicated. It's all about the sound. Now, the one exception that I make is if you're going to school, because if you're going to school, then yes, then you're going to be moving in academic circles. You need the grade. So then we are going to learn things in a way that university professor is going to accept and like and give you the grade for. Right? I'm preparing you for school. But if you're trying to work as a musician, or you're trying to just learn how to play your instrument, and you need working knowledge of music theory, what you need is you need to learn how things sound and what they're called. Full stop. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need anything else. Everything else is a tool. Now, I teach guitar, so everything that I'm talking about applies to the guitar. I don't know if the concepts that I'm presenting are transferable to other instruments, like brass, in the brass family, or the bowed strings family, or the piano. I should talk to my piano teacher and see what he thinks about this stuff. But I know they work well within the guitar, because the guitar, being a chromatic instrument, we are essentially, everything we do, it might as well be in the key of C. The concept of playing in all 12 keys, right? So if I'm here, so I'm just basically moving down, and just moving down the circle, well, cycle 4, right? The circle of fifths this way. All I'm doing is I'm cycling through the fingerings of, in this case, the major scale. I could do the same thing with arpeggios. I could do the same thing with everything, because we have shapes for everything. So if you're my student and you're practicing in one key and you're like, okay, I only know the key of C. Okay, you're playing in the key of C. A shape. Levitt shape, 1A, I think I call this one. And then G shape. And then this one. And this one. This one. And this one. That's it. That's all the shapes. Those are the same shapes that you would play if you're playing in all 12 keys. And so I can play them all in a single position. And it's just a matter of learning the shapes in the correct order, and then you're golden. You can just do that. So changing keys on the guitar is not a huge production like it is on the piano. The piano, you have to change the fingering, and everything is different. I think a big problem with the way guitar students learn music theory is that they're learning music theory from the perspective of a keyboard player, of a pianist. And you can't fault anybody, because that's the way they teach it in university. That's how I learned it in school too. But if music is a language, then doing that is like trying to learn Spanish by learning Chinese first, and then translating your Chinese into Spanish. Like that makes no sense. Just saying that sounds ridiculous. But we do that constantly when we're learning music theory from the perspective of one instrument, and then trying to move into another. Why not just learn it directly on the instrument that you have? And that's what you hear a lot of people say, like, oh, well, learning music theory, you have to learn on the piano first, because then it makes sense, because everything is in front of you. Sure, because you're teaching it from the perspective of the piano. But if you learn music theory from the perspective of the guitar, then it's going to be native to the guitar. It just needs you need a little bit deeper understanding of theory in order to do that. That's it. And I think a lot of people haven't done the work to do that. I don't think everybody's malicious. I think sometimes it just comes from a place of, well, we've always done things this way, so we're going to keep doing things this way. And I submit that we could do better. And that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Just music theory. Number one, it's not as hard. Okay, so let me summarize the video. Number one, music theory is not as hard as you think. All it is a list in a system of naming. So it's a list of names of the sounds that we use in music. That's it. Number two, I believe, and this is my opinion, you can argue with me if you want, that the way that music theory is taught to guitarists is wrong. because we're learning music theory from the perspective of a pianist, not directly on the guitar. And lastly, I think it's wrong to overcomplicate concepts just to make yourself sound smart. Stop. Teach people what they need to learn. Make it simple, make it easy. That's the goal of a teacher, is to take all the information. I'm taking, 20 years of information, and I'm condensing it down so my students can learn it in 5 years or less. Okay? Do better. I'll catch you guys next time.